Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Occult Perspectives. So today I have an interesting video for you. I'm wanting to jump back into morals and dogma, and we're also going to talk a little bit about Elden Ring symbolism. Oh, sorry about that. For those of you who are new to the channel, what I do on here is I talk about different esoteric research subjects. This includes Freemasonry, alchemy, the Tree of Death, the Tree of Life, archangels, demons, you name it. So if you like this material, make sure to subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. So let's get straight into it. So Elden Ring is a very popular game at this point that came out back in 2022. And I've been studying the mythology of it for quite a while now. I almost feel like a student, as if I were in a class to study this material, but really I'm not. I find it very interesting, and a lot of the lore can be connected, correlated to, or attributed to like real occult principles. So let's kind of get into that a little bit. In Elden Ring lore, you pretty much have what's called the One Great, and the One Great is basically all of creation before it separates, before any kind of fracturing or before any kind of Big Bang takes place. It's known as the One Great. It's the most primordial state of reality. And if you're wondering what this music is, this is just classical music. It's coming from the video Classical Music for Reading. Mozart, Chopin? Is that how you say that? Or is it Chopin? I'm not sure. Debussy? And I don't even know. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation on that. Tchaikovsky? Sounds Russian. But anyway, for anyone who's wondering where the music's coming from. So the One Great in Elden Ring is this primordial state of being. I guess the equivalent to it in Kabbalah or Hermeticism would probably be the Ein, which is technically the no thing or the pure vacuum of spirit before any manifestation takes place. So in Elden Ring lore, the One Great is the primordial unified state of existence, a world egg, quote, of potential. And then the second most important being is the greater will. So that's the One Great. The unified state of existence, a world egg of potential, while the greater will is the cosmic entity. It's considered an outer god that caused the One Great to fracture, leading to the creation of distinct beings, life, souls, and the laws of order, like causality and regression, that govern the lands between and the universe. Essentially, causality is like cause and effect, and then regression is all things yearning or pulling back to source in a way. So causality is more like that masculine energy, life branching out and creating new connections, new synapses, where the law of regression is like everything coming back into being, into source. It's very feminine. It's like drawing in, regressing back to an average or back to... in mathematics, there's a way they show that, but it's also just regressing back to a commonality, to a common source. So these two laws. So as you can see, I haven't even read a whole paragraph here of this Elden Ring. This is an AI overview on Google of the lore, but I mean, it just gets so deep, and you can study a lot of these games. Elder Scrolls, Elden Ring. There's so many of them. The Star Wars universe, all of them have profound occult and spiritual significances, and you can take a lot of the lessons and such, and you can apply them to your real studies, your real practices, in a pretty tangible way. So basically, the greater will is this being which stimulated or stirred the One Great into fracturing itself, into breaking off into multiple parts. So the One Great could also be like viewed as the primordial womb of the universe, and the greater will is like the masculine force coming in, right? coming in and quote unquote impregnating the world, breaking it into various pieces. But that's what creates life, is separation. See, that's the paradox. One of the prerequisites of life is separation. We've talked about that before on this channel. The relationship is that of origin and disruption. The greater will shattered primordial wholeness to bring forth the current reality. Even the word current there could be seen symbolically. Though some lore suggests this, quote, mistake allows for suffering, while the frenzied flame seeks to reverse it back to the one great. The frenzied flame is essentially this source which is very chaotic in nature. It wants to destroy everything, but it's doing it more from the perspective of bringing everything back into that unity. There's no more fracturing. There's no more separating into different pieces. No more expansion, really. It's just coming back. Everything's being destroyed so that there's no more branching off. There's no more, quote, mistakes. There's no more pain. There's no more suffering. There's no more incarnation. It's just back to that primordial state, which a lot of people would view that obviously as evil. That's the destruction of the world. But some see it as you're basically alleviating the world. You're healing the world by destroying the pain. So there's different ways to view this. I've shown this before, and I know one of my Elden Ring lore videos with Melina. There's a conversation you have with her right outside the room of the three fingers in the video game it's pretty profound and it's pretty deep. I played that little clip before in one of my other videos I've done, I'm pretty sure. So the frenzied flame can almost be seen as like this qliphothic, destructive energy, but it's also just a part of nature, a very destructive aspect in its most raw form. And there's like certain grimoires I've also gone over on this channel which kind of talk about that whole idea. Even Curtis Joseph's Black Magic of Ahriman book talks about how a lot of the times expansion or light, a lot of the light traditions you're actually separating yourself further from source, from creating more and more fragments, so to speak. So it's like you're expanding outwards, but you're just getting further and further from the source itself. So it's interesting to view these different aspects of creation from these different viewpoints, and seeing the difference of kind of that outgoing type energy and that energy that wants to pull things back into a common source. So you have obviously a mixture of these types of energies going on throughout the universe or creation itself, however you want to view this. Key aspects of their relationship: the source and the agent of change. The one great was everything. Then the greater will intervened, creating separation and distinction from that initial unity. Order versus chaos. The greater will embodies the drive for order, bringing structure, like the Erd Tree and the Elden Ring. The Elden Ring is actually like a rune in this age, which represents pure order. That's a whole other topic I don't know that we'll get into in this little video. But the greater will basically embodies the drive for order. It wants to bring about order out of that primordial chaos and to bring structure. And it uses this through the Erd Tree and the Elden Ring itself, and through vassals. Basically, it uses beings that it channels its will through, so to speak, such as the fingers and the Elden Beast. Spoiler alert, if you want to play through the game and not be, anything ruined for you, this probably wouldn't be the best video. But the Elden Beast is the final boss of the game, and that is like the main vassal of this force called the Greater Will. It basically channels itself through this monster called the Elden Beast. The Frenzied Flame, conversely, which we were talking about before, seeks to return all to the one great's original chaotic unity. Once again, a lot of darker grimoires that I've studied kind of have that purpose of almost wanting to bring things back into that unity. And you also have this idea in the game Dark Souls as well. There's the Age of Fire, which is actually supposed to be ending, and you're supposed to be the Lord of Darkness to usher in the Age of Darkness, because eventually fire dies out and then you're just left with darkness. Fire can only last for so long. So there's a lot of these different occult principles which very much make themselves known, within these games. Let's continue. Causality and regression, we were talking about that before. The greater will's actions established in the fundamental laws of causality, cause and effect, and regression, cycles of death and rebirth. So regression, think cycles, think cyclical, think circles, feminine energy, like we were saying before, that define the world, making the fractured pieces inherently linked to their origin. So remember, all things are connected at the end of the day. A matter of perspective. Characters like Hyetta, aligned with the frenzied flame, view the greater will's fracturing of the one great as a catastrophic error that introduced pain. A very interesting viewpoint on life. Hyetta is actually blind, and that's kind of what gives her more strength and more, basically, clarity in her spiritual vision. You see that with a lot of people who are physically blind. They have a lot more intuitive faculties and perceptions. Without having the physical sight, they have greater spiritual sight. In essence, the one great is the before state, and the greater will is the force that initiated the, quote, after state, shaping the reality player's experience. So that's a good rundown of those two things. I might run through this real quick, just to add on to all of that. The greater will holds a superior and unique position, generally considered to be a supreme creator-level deity that stands above the, quote, outer gods. Even though it's considered an outer god itself, it technically stands above the other, quote, outer gods. In the spiritual hierarchy of the Elden Ring universe, the outer gods are typically seen as lesser, though still immensely powerful entities that vie for influence within the world of the greater will that's established. Key distinctions within the hierarchy. The greater will is represented as the first mover, or as the original creator force responsible for the existence of the universe and the fundamental concept of order itself. Makes me think of Dogma in a lot of ways, because Dogma is that first line or that first movement after Kether as well. So technically these are more primordial forces than Sephiroth on the tree, but they kind of also have their correspondence on the tree with the Sephiroth as well. The outer gods, by contrast, are more akin to powerful yet still subordinate natural or conceptual forces. So they're kind of a lot more like, maybe more along the lines of elementals and real occultism. I could be wrong though, but these are like, they're gods and goddesses in their own right, but they're forces of nature, more or less, more than like the cosmic origin principles that we were speaking of before. The god of scarlet rot, the formless mother of blood that exists within the reality the greater will created. And those have a lot of interesting things as well. Like the formless mother of blood has, you can see a lot of correlations between that and a lot of the darker energies that are like higher up in the infernal hierarchy. Influence and power. The greater will's power is the dominant force in the lands between, so it has the most physically manifest dominant power within the world, primarily through the Elden Ring and the Golden Order it established. I don't think there's really too much more here. It's a lot of repeating the same things that we've kind of gone into. Yeah, let's look up a little bit on the... Oops, sorry. Let's look up a little bit on the... I keep clicking the wrong thing here. I think I lost it now at this point, maybe. Mother of blood. Let's see. So yeah, this Mother of Blood, this is an entity that is very connected to blood. Mother of Blood refers to the formless mother, an outer god who craves wounds and bestows power through blood, particularly empowering Moog, Lord of Blood, and his followers with blood flame abilities and the ability to become blood fiends. So a lot of the different powers in the lands between, like magic and such, are channeled. The original energy is channeled through these outer gods. So the Mother of Blood is like responsible for a lot of the quote-unquote blood magic, which could obviously be seen to have a lot of parallels to like demonic or infernal type energies. She represents a twisted form of nurture, finding beauty in pain and defilement, communicating through physical wounds and transforming those who embrace their cursed or abundant blood, as seen with Moog's Omen blood. So it's a formless cosmic entity. So we're talking about star energies here. We're talking about extraterrestrial outer forces. And like I said, even though this is technically fiction, obviously it has its correspondence. You can relate it back to, real esoteric concepts. And she kind of represents if you look at pain and pleasure from a hermetic point of view, literally a lot of these concepts they're literally the same force, but it's different degrees of the same force that you're experiencing. So one degree of it could be pleasure, a different degree of it it's the same force perhaps, but it has different, one could feel very good, another can feel very bad. So it's more or less how our human minds and bodies interact with these forces. So obviously this formless mother is representing the more pain end of the spectrum of polarity there, if that makes sense. The darker, just fulfilling that part of creation, if that makes sense. Try not to view these things as good or evil inherently, necessarily. Her influence transforms blood, especially cursed omen blood, and that's a whole thing in and of itself, or blood from offerings into potent blood flame. Okay, anyway, without getting into more lore, that's probably enough to kind of get you a general idea of how different spiritual hierarchies work within this game. Another concept I want to talk about real quick, which is pretty prevalent in alchemy. Symbolically, it has a lot of similarities to the Baphomet, because the Baphomet kind of represents this androgynous type being. It has aspects of male and female, but the Rebis, I think that's how you pronounce it, this figure you see right here, is also heavily used. The symbolism of them is heavily used in Elden Ring. The Rebis is a key alchemical concept representing the divine hermaphrodite, embodying the union of opposites, like Marika, the Red King in the alchemical equation, and Marika, who is the White Queen. Or they actually mixed this around. They got it. Radagon, the husband. Remember, though, these are sorry, before I continue, I'm getting ahead of myself. Another spoiler alert for those who may want to play this game. Radagon and Marika are the same being. They were husband and wife at one point. Radagon actually had a different wife, which is so crazy. He had a different wife, left that wife to join his other half and become her consort. So Marika and Radagon are the same being. It's really crazy. This game has some very interesting ideas and concepts. So this embodies the union of opposites, like Radagon, the Red King, and he also has red hair to symbolize it, and Marika, the White Queen, she has white hair, into a perfect unified being. Crucial for controlling the Elden Ring, symbolizing a higher state of being or the Philosopher's Stone that binds reality, as seen in Goldmask's quest to understand regression and Marika's dual nature. regression being that female correspondence once again, which would make sense to be in alignment with America. Union of opposites, of course. The Rebis merges the masculine, the red king, the sun, the heavenly part with the feminine, the white queen, moon, earthly principles, forming a singular, complete entity. And of course, the ultimate goal is to have this process done within, right? So that you become a full and complete being. Your feminine energies are balanced with your masculine energies. Your fire is balanced with your water, so on and so forth. Marika and Radigan. Queen Marika and Radigan, who are one being with conflicting wills, embody this duality and internal struggle, representing a flawed or incomplete Rebis. So it's not a perfect Rebis. They have a lot of issues going on. The law of regression. Gold Mask's quest explores this, using the law of regression to understand the Golden Order's brokenness, ultimately aiming for a unified perfect state similar to the Rebis. And Gold Mask is a character we don't really have time to get into, but he's a scholar, essentially, looking to find out the true, core fundamental truths of what's actually going on in the game. Empyrean connection. The concept links to Empyreans, being chosen to rule, suggesting they are born from or embody aspects of this unified divine potential. So Empyrean is an interesting term or concept too, because it represents the three outer veils above the tree of life, or outside the tree of life. But in Elden Ring, it represents a demigod who is actually a potential candidate to become the god of the actual era, so to become a true god, so to speak, rather than just a demigod. Like Queen Marika, she's a goddess, or a god, however you want to see it. Gold Mask's quest, do I need to read that? But it's interesting because Gold Mask is actually, he's seeing the flaw with Marika and Radigan, and he's attempting to create a perfect balance that Marika and Radigan failed to achieve. That's why one of the endings of the game, and that's what's cool about all these different endings, we've barely even scratched the surface on a lot of it, but each ending represents like an archetypal world. So one ending is the Age of the Stars, and it has to do with the moons. There's two moons. There's a dark moon, and there's the full moon of Renala. The dark moon is connected to Rani, her daughter. The full moon is connected to Renala, and then the stars, of course, or the zodiac. All of that is one ending. The frenzied flame is one ending, which is like the death or the destruction of the world, to cease and end all life, or all pain and suffering as they see it. Another ending is destined death. So when the Golden Order was created, it was created by taking destined death out of the world, so natural death doesn't happen anymore. Instead, the souls reincarnated through the Erd Tree, instead of souls being able to die a natural death. So you would be able to reinsert that natural death and make it so that beings could have that natural death again. So then they're not necessarily stuck in that state of not being able to die. I'm pretty sure that's how that ending works. And then you have the ending of the Golden Order perfected, which is the ending of Gold Mask's journey, where you're able to actually repair the Elden Ring and bring about perfect order. So that has more alignments with like solar traditions, like Masonry and the Golden Dawn and things of that nature. You can see a lot of more sun symbolism there when it comes to order, a lot of that masculine type energy. So the ending of destined death prevents true final death, causing the undead in the lands between to stagnate when the rune of death was sealed away by Marika. Releasing it, so when you release it, it leads to the potential age of the Duskborn, where life and death coexist. Okay. The core idea is that destined death is the fundamental force that allows for true mortality, and its absence creates the world's problems. So you'll be able to The player decides the fate of mortality, restoring it imperfectly, integrating it with life, or destroying everything within it. Interesting. So let me see, what is the actual result of the destined death ending? And this video, I can tell, is already going to be probably a little bit longer than I thought it would be, because we haven't even gotten into my other book yet. The destined death ending: you restore death, you bring back true indiscriminate mortality to the lands between by releasing the sealed rune of death, meaning everyone dies naturally. Yep, so I was right. And their souls can finally cease, ending the cycle of revival and the soulless undead, those who live in death. The actual result is the world's return to its natural state. But it's a massive, potentially genocidal event, as it kills anyone who lived far past their destined time after America sealed away death. So really, it's just going to be mostly bring probably peace to a lot of spirits or souls that have been stuck in that in-between state of life and death. End of immortality. The pseudo-immortality granted by the Erd Tree's rule over death is broken. Let's see, what are all the other Elden Ring endings? Yeah, because they all fulfill some type of archetype. That's what's so cool about the game, is it's such a all-encompassing type of game. All archetypes are pretty much covered. Oh. Looks a little like foggy on the... I don't know. That's actually the camera. There, I think that looks better. So the Age of Order, we talked about that. The Age of the Duskborn, that's where death is restored. The normal one, Age of Fracture, where the Tarnished chooses to mend the Elden Ring as it is and begins the new age as Elden Lord. So I guess that's where you keep the Elden Ring the same. It's kind of interesting. Blessing of Despair, which one's that? Mending, oh, that's the one with the Mending Rune of the Fell Curse. That's kind of a messed up one. With the Fell Curse embedded in the Elden Ring, all present and future generations will be afflicted with despair. So yeah, it's definitely not a happy ending. Yeah, everyone's basically cursed. That is not an ending that you want. And then the Lord of the Frenzied Flame ending, of course, where everything's destroyed. The Age of the Stars ending, which is very astrological and has to do with the subconscious mind, because she says at the end of the game we're about to go into chaos, confusion. Upon the order I envision, mine will be an order not of gold, but the stars and the moon of the chilled night. I would keep them far from the earth beneath our feet. As it is now, life and souls and order are bound tightly together, but I would have them at a great remove, and have the certainties of sight, emotion, faith, and touch all become impossibilities, which is why I would abandon this soil with mine order. Yep, it's all about the stars and moving towards the celestial, the greater mysteries of the subconscious mind. And this is the English translation. I know the Japanese translation is a lot more accurate because it's technically the original. In her final cutscene, she states the following: "The battle is over, I see. I do solemnly swear to every living being and every living soul, now cometh the age of the stars, 1,000-year voyage under the wisdom of the moon. Here beginneth the chill night that encompasses all, reaching the great beyond, into fear, doubt, and loneliness, as the path stretcheth into darkness. Well then, shall we, my fair consort eternal?" All right. Let's get on to Or let's get back to the Rebis. There's also the idea of the red and white queen, which we briefly discussed. Radigan representing the red king, America the white queen. The whole idea of uniting opposites again. Excuse me. Their children, Melania, goddess of Rod, is actually linked to the bloody or red rubedo stage of alchemy, and Nicola, linked to the pure white albedo stage, are manifestations of this alchemical work. The forced marriage and eventual separation mirror the alchemical process of Rebis, the perfect hermaphroditic being leading to the creation and shattering of the Elden ring. All right, so yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff you can study in video game lore. It gets pretty nerdy, pretty in-depth. Let's get into Morals and Dogma. I'm just going to read a little bit. We've covered this book a lot before on this YouTube channel, and I'd like to kind of get back into maybe where I was before, because there's just so much to cover in this book. It's a really, really neat book. But I'm going to read just a little bit from this last chapter because it kind of gets into the idea of the Rebis a little bit. I don't think it refers to it as the Rebis in Morals and Dogma. But yeah, let's get into it a little bit, and I'll just get as far as I feel like it. This last chapter it's chapter 32, after the Sublime Prince of the Royal Secret, so that represents the 32nd degree of Freemasonry, and these are pretty much just old. Albert Pike wrote these basically as little lectures that could be read alongside receiving the degrees, but at this point, anybody can get themselves a copy of Morals and Dogma, Mason or non-Mason. It doesn't really matter. A lot of this, most of this stuff is just, it's open to study anyway to anybody who's interested in learning about it. So, Master of the Royal Secret, Sublime Prince of the Royal Secret. The occult science of the ancient magi was concealed under the shadows of the ancient mysteries. It was imperfectly revealed, or rather disfigured, by the Gnostics. So Albert Pike is saying that the Gnostics actually kind of disfigured or imperfectly revealed this original ancient science of the Magi. It is guessed at under the obscurities that cover the pretended crimes of the Templars, and it is found enveloped in enigmas that seem impenetrable in the rites of the highest Masonry. Magiism was the science of Abraham and Orpheus, of Confucius and Zoroaster. It was the dogmas of this science that were engraven on the tables of stone by Hanok. Is that Hanok or Hanok? And Trismegistus, obviously Hermes Trismegistus. We hear about these stones either in the form of course you have the emerald tablets, and then I believe the Ten Commandments were kind of like a later, watered down version of a lot of the older laws, produced in such a way that it served, I guess, the function of that age. But you have what's called like the written law, and then there's the real, same with like the Jewish tradition as a whole. There's like there's the outer law, but then there's the true esoteric, teachings which underlie it. So a lot of things are just revealed, as we'll get to here in a second. Moses purified and revealed them, for that is the meaning of the word reveal. When Moses revealed this information, he covered them with a new veil when he made of the Holy Kabbalah the exclusive heritage of the people of Israel, and the inviolate secrets of its priests. The mysteries of Thebes and Eleusis preserved among the nations some symbols of it, already altered, and the mysterious key whereof was lost among the instruments of an ever-growing superstition. So yeah, basically, you have this old wisdom that over time, that's the basic idea, is that it gets kind of just like diluted over time. It loses its essence, so to speak, over time. Measure a corner of the creation and multiply that space in proportional progression, and the entire infinite will multiply its circles filled with universes, which will pass in proportional segments between the ideal and elongating branches of your compass. So looking at the compass, as one of the symbolical tools. Now suppose that from any point whatever of the infinite above you, a hand holds another compass or a square. The lines of the celestial triangle will necessarily meet those of the compass of science to form the mysterious Star of Solomon. So what he's saying is there's multiple layers of that as above, so below relationship going on. And just when you think you've seen the most macrocosmic level, there's usually another level above that. We see that in the idea with like multiple trees of life. There's like just many. It depends on which system you're studying, but really there could be like infinite numbers of trees. It just, there's infinite fractals of existence. It's amazing to even try and a lot of these concepts and ideas to even like, think about them. It's hard to like wrap our minds around them from a rational point of view. All eyes do not see alike. Even the visible creation is not, for all who look upon it, of one form and one color. Our brain is a book printed within and without, and the two writings are, with all men, more or less confused. So yeah, even though the physical reality is quote unquote the same for all of us, we don't all perceive reality in the same way, is what he's getting at. The primary tradition of the single revelation has been preserved under the name of the Kabbalah. The two main books of this, the Kabbalistic doctrine, which was also the dogma of the Magi and of Hermes, is contained in the Sefer Yetzirah and the Sohar and the Talmud, which are really hard books to read, and that's something that I have kind of not really taken the time to go into and study, is those original books of Kabbalah, like the Sefer Yetzirah, the Sohar, the Talmud, all those. Really what I've learned of those books, I've read from different books that kind of quote those original texts and kind of try to explain it in a way that actually like makes some sense. Magic is that which it is. It is by itself. I like that. So essentially, the nature of reality is what it is. Like the mathematics, for it is the exact and absolute science of nature and its laws. But then again, we also know the first Hermetic principle, which is the law of mentalism, that the mind does have, can obviously change, but I think basically what he's saying is the mechanism of how all of these things work. The occult mechanisms are what they are at their, purest source. Magic is that which it is. It is by itself. So even though you can have a quote-unquote subjective experience, through your experience you're changing consciousness or sending out energy essentially to create change on the physical plane or to make your reality conform to your will, essentially. But there's still a mechanism behind how this works. You still have to understand how the laws work. Otherwise, you can't really use them in the correct way. So like the mathematics, for it is the exact and absolute science of nature and its laws. That's why magic can also be so dangerous too, because we're not, a lot of the times from our human perspectives, we're not actually seeing the end result of the waves, the ripple effects that we're sending out into the cosmos. We might see some of the effects of it, but we may not know the ultimate effect, and we may not know that until, quote unquote, the end of time, or the beginning of time, or everything is now, right? However you want to perceive it. Magic is the science of the ancient magi and the Christian religion, which has imposed silence on the lying oracles and put an end to the prestige of the false gods. He refers to the title of magi is actually the title of kings, because initiation into magiism constitutes a genuine royalty. And because the grand art of the magi is styled by all the adepts the royal art, or the royal realm or empire, sanctum regnum. Interesting. The star which guided them is that same blazing star, the image whereof we find in all initiations. So the star in the east that the magi follow, it's that blazing star seen in the story of Christ. The quintessence of the alchemists. Okay, so this is where he starts to get into the, as we know, polarity is a very important concept to understand, and how things kind of like check and balance each other. So reality a lot of the times is just a behind the scenes of even this physical manifest reality that, like, I'm seeing like right before me. There's, even though things aren't seemingly in motion physically, there are so many forces which are plus and minuses which are counterbalancing each other to create the reality that we're seeing, manifested before us right now. So magic unites in one and the same science whatsoever philosophy can possess that is most certain, and religion of the infallible and the eternal. So it perfectly and incontestably reconciles these two terms that at first blush seem so opposed to each other: faith and reason, science and creed, authority and liberty. And you see the world often like basically separated into these different polarities, or people will be like, oh, I'm this, I'm that, I'm left wing, I'm right wing. But really each side's just a powerhouse for the other side, if they but understood how the battery of life really works. So it's just funny to see these forces at play, but very few actually understand the mechanics behind it and are able to like stand back and just take an observant view at all of this going on. Rewinding a little bit here on this page, I'm on page 842. I don't know if anybody would be following from the same copy of this or not. The star which guided the magi, we talked about to the alchemists, it's the sign of the quintessence. To the Kabbalists, it's the sacred pentagram. The study of this pentagram could not but lead the magi to the knowledge of the new name, which was about to raise itself above all names and cause all creatures capable of adoration to bend the knee. Probably referring to the full, not just the Yod He Vav He, but if you put Shin in the middle, Yod He Shin Vav He, that's like the complete pentagram, and I believe that represents like Christ energy, because Yod He Vav He is spiritual masculine and spiritual feminine, and physical masculine and physical feminine. So it's the combination of all four of those. And then you add Shin in the middle, refers to a 5-letter Hebrew combination often linked to the Tetragrammaton, but with the addition of the letter Shin in the middle, forming a mystical name associated with Jesus or Yeshua, particularly in Renaissance Kabbalah, representing God's name combined with the concept of salvation, making it a pentagrammaton instead of just the tetragrammaton, often read as Adonai or while YHVH is God's personal, unpronounceable name, often read as Adonai or Yahweh. So 2 of those names are used in the LBRP, the Yod He Vav He and the Adonai. Adding the Shin, which means breath or tooth in Hebrew, transforms it, hinting at Jesus. And then you can look up further symbolisms on that, of course. But yeah, it's interesting because the pentagram is used so often in ceremonial magic and things of that nature. So it's a very powerful symbol. Blavatsky, interestingly, I mean, she doesn't... I did a video about one of the Blavatsky books, and she talks about how the pentagram is like not actually really as powerful as people think it is. So Theosophical Society has like some alternate views, definitely from an occult lens. They seem to have a lot of information though, especially when it comes to like prior eras of the world. Because she talks about like the light, the Lemurians and other races, essentially, which were here before our race on this planet. So when it comes to like esoteric history, they seem to know a lot of stuff, but they seem to also kind of have their own view on how it all works. It's just interesting how there's so many different traditions covering different archetypes of magic, but there doesn't really seem to be just one universal school of wisdom. Masonry is pretty universal. Like it takes... People who study Masonry also study, if you're a real Mason, you're going to study pretty much all different traditions and try to understand as much as you can from as many different traditions as possible. That's the whole point, is to have a more universal outlook on all of this stuff. There is an absolute in the matters of the intelligence and of faith. The supreme reason has not left the gleams of the human understanding to vacillate at hazard, or vacillate at hazard. I think that's what that word is. There is an incontestable verity. There is an infallible method of knowing this verity, and by the knowledge of it, those who accept it as a rule may give their will a sovereign power that will make them the masters of all inferior things and of all errant spirits. That is to say, will make them the arbiters and kings of the world. So science has its nights and its dawns because it gives the intellectual world a life which has its regulated movements and its progressive phases. It is with truths, as with the luminous rays, nothing of what is concealed is lost, but also nothing of what is discovered is absolutely new. God has been pleased to give to science, which is the reflection of his glory, the seal of his eternity. In other words, if you study science from the correct perspective, basically you're going to discover the wisdom of God, essentially, the wisdom of creation itself. If you really use the scientific method, which is that things are always open to change, everything's pretty much theory until new data comes in, right? Which could change your theory or change the current viewpoints of the scientific realm. A lot of the times they tend to get stuck in their ways. It's very robotic and it's not open to change. But you also don't want to just accept new theories either without being able to test them, right? A lot of the spiritual information we can't really, it's not really, we don't have the tools. I mean, as far as I know, we don't have the tools to really measure these things yet, but people who were ancient adepts and such, they were able to perceive reality from such a space that they didn't need the technology, right? They ate right, they lived right, they basically were a divine channel or a divine, how do I want to put this? They became a proper vessel for the divine energy to flow through them. So the more that you do this, the less you have a need for technology or for AI or for all these things, because you're tapping into the real raw current of divine energy. That's what's kind of, too much technology is not really a bad thing, but too much of it's going to take away from that natural organic power, right? To a degree, if it's not used properly. So I'm kind of just trying to read through here and read anything that I really feel like, because a lot of the times he just kind of goes on and repeats a lot of the same concepts, but it's worth going through the book and reading the entire book. I do have to say that. And even if things are reiterated, that just means it's kind of being pounded into your head, maybe in different ways, so that you can understand the lesson, but understand it from different viewpoints, or be able to understand it to such a degree that you could communicate the concept to someone else and maybe teach somebody else, too, at that point. Columns of Seth, Enoch, Solomon, and Hercules have symbolized in the Magi traditions this universal law of the equilibrium, and the science of the equilibrium or balancing of forces had led the initiates to that of the universal gravitation around the centers of life, heat, and light. So yeah, basically understanding how the pillars work, understanding how polarity works, how the universe is set up in such a way that it's using these quote-unquote opposite forces or reconciling forces to basically produce the result or the manifested reality that you're seeing before you in its current state. On both a macrocosmic and a microcosmic level. This is kind of interesting. The secret of the occult sciences is that of nature itself. So literally it's just the study of the framework or the fabric of reality itself at its most core fundamental level. It's really what the occult is. The secret of the generation of the angels and the worlds, that of the omnipotence of God. Ye shall be like the Elohim, knowing good and evil, quote from Genesis. Had the serpent of Genesis said, and the tree of knowledge became the tree of death. They are one and the same, but really it's all one universal tree of death and tree of life. For 6,000 years, the martyrs of knowledge toil and die at the foot of this tree, that it may again become the tree of life. Interesting. So he's seeing the absolute sought for unsuccessfully by the insensate and found by the sages is the truth, the reality, and the reason of the universal equilibrium. I would say one of the only downfalls of a lot of, and you kind of see this in more how do I want to say this? This idea of like an absolute truth, and you cannot err from this truth. That's the thing is, even in Hermetics, they say there is no real absolute truth. Even every truth is quote unquote a half truth. But there is a truth. Basically, there is this point within physical reality that is like the closest that you can get to the truth, and it can reflect cosmic truth. But to actually get at the core of truth itself, I don't know is truly possible. but you want to reflect in society, and that's ideas you see in Masonry and other mystery schools. You want to reflect the beauties of higher wisdom and higher knowledge and higher understanding in such a way that that understanding of higher realms can be reflected in the society. So like the ultimate goal would really to be have really institutions of learning all across the face of the world that teach the mystery, that teach the core fundamental laws of reality, so that we can actually come from a place of understanding. So we're not just, as we said before, even in the Elden Ring mythology, there's shatterings and there's divisions and there's more and more branching off, which isn't a bad thing. Expansion and the masculine energy as a whole is a good thing. But when that comes, when it's just functioning from a place of not having consciousness or not having awareness, then that's where things start to go crazy. And that's kind of what we see in the world today. So we almost have to, as a culture, we need to practice more of that feminine of pulling back in, regressing, the law of regression, to come back into a state where we have a more solid foundation and we have really institutions of learning where we're learning to understand truth at its core, rather than to understand and trying to understand, a lot of things have been built up over time, and then you're just understanding that outer layer. A lot of institutions of learning, or even just institutions in general, are just working on that outer layer, but we want to get to the core of reality. And we could really have like mystery school. We could really have a world that's where there's like a real life Hogwarts, or the closest thing to like a real life Hogwarts as you can get, where you study magic and occultism and all of these things, but you're not doing it. See, here's the problem. This is partially why it's kept secret, is because people, they either don't want people to know that stuff because it empowers the self, and that's really the whole the whole idea is to really allow people to have a kingdom of self. They're either the king of their own reality or the queen of their own reality, or whatever it is. However it is you want to look at it, you basically become a sovereign being that understands these laws, and then you can teach these fundamental principles to other people, so that they can understand how reality is kind of working, how it's structured, going back to that blueprint or that archetype of reality, and trying to understand it from there. Weren't we talking about that before? Anyway, but you get where I'm going with all that. I would think so, anyway. But yeah, I could go on and go on. But a lot of people will say, like, and see, here's where a lot of people want like world peace, or they want perfect order, or maybe they want perfect chaos. But here's the thing, you can't have either one of those, because if you had perfect order, there would be no more growth, there would be no more catalyst. Everything would just be perfect, and it would be perfectly ordered and perfectly structured, but there would be no more growth. So essentially you would be creating stagnation. You don't want pure chaos, because you don't want complete and utter destruction and annihilation. There has to be order, so there's structures and frameworks within to experience the reality. So you don't completely want one or the other. And there's a lot of chaos in the world today, but that chaos is fueling unseen things. So it's not so much that it's bad, it's just a lot of karma and things playing itself out as part of the equation of life, either on one side of the equation or the other, and intermixing. So basically reality is this giant one equation, which is like happening simultaneously all at once, so to speak. So I think that's, let me see if there's anything else I'd want to read in this little section before I go ahead and end the video. So yeah, there's this whole idea of like, oh, we must find absolute truth, and like, you know, you cannot err, and talk about evil. And you see a lot of this in like the chivalric, a lot more chivalrous times and medieval times, and it's much more a God versus devil or good versus evil type mentality. Right versus wrong. So in the future times, we're gonna not see it so much as good or evil or right or wrong. We're gonna understand the mechanisms of how it works, and just understanding it for what it is from the perspective of creation itself, if that makes sense, from more of a understanding of how these things basically function and operate, their functionality, right? Light is the equilibrium of shadow and lucidity. Movement is the equilibrium of inertia and activity. Authority is the equilibrium of liberty and power. Wisdom is the equilibrium in the thoughts, which are the scintillations and rays of the intellect. Virtue is the equilibrium in the affections. Beauty is harmonious proportion in forms. So this whole idea of forms and equilibrium, it all goes back to geometry, and it all goes back to life, and it all goes back to the cosmos, and it all goes back to what they call in Elden Ring the One Great, which then had form created from it by being fractured by the greater will. And we see this idea with the Ein, I guess essentially probably being impregnated by the Ein Sof, the infinite all, something along those lines. So we're talking about big concepts here, which are really hard for us to even fathom and understand here on the physical plane. But anyway, let me finish that up. Let me go back. Virtue is equilibrium in the affections. Beauty is harmonious proportion in forms. The beautiful lives are the accurate ones. And the magnificences of nature are an algebra of graces and splendors. Everything just is beautiful. Everything beautiful ought to be just. Which is weird, because I see a lot of things in this world that maybe they have physical beauty, but they kind of seem to lack the essence of... And the reason for that is because a lot of inauthenticity in the world, a lot of artificiality. It's not real. There's so much fakeness in the world, but a lot of people do that out of... It's like a survival mechanism, you know? It's like they think that they have to be that way in order to survive, when in all reality, if more of us were authentic, we could create a more authentic world. So I think I'll go ahead and end the video there. Thank you very much for staying tuned today if you made it all the way through this video. If you're new to the channel, like I said before, make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you go and check out the Patreon, and be sure to be on the lookout for new videos coming out in 2026. We're almost in the new year, and we've almost reached 100,000 views on the channel. So that's quite an accomplishment. That means that I've reached, I think, a lot of people throughout the world, you know, with this channel. And it's a very humbling, you know, thing to really think about, that, you know, somewhere along the line, maybe I inspired someone, or hopefully affected them in a positive way that's helped them on their journey. Maybe it's helped you on your journey. So, all right, everyone, until next time, much peace and love and blessings, and I will see you all soon.